It was the kind of Tuesday morning that London does better than anywhere else on Earth, grey at the edges, golden in the middle, the sky doing that thing where it can't quite decide whether it owes you sunshine or an apology. I'd been standing outside the gates of Windsor Castle for 43 minutes. Not because I had anywhere to be. Not because I was waiting for something in particular. I was there because my sister had bailed on our trip last minute, classic her, and I'd paid for the train ticket already, so Windsor it was. Alone. With a paper cup of tea that had given up being hot somewhere around Slough. The crowds were the usual mix. School groups in matching lanyards. A Japanese tour group with a guide holding up a yellow umbrella like a lighthouse in a sea of anoraks. A couple American, definitely American, you can tell by the way they stand in photos, like they're being graded on it, trying to get the perfect shot with the round tower in the background. 3 attempts. 4. The husband's smile getting a little more structural with each one. Normal. Ordinary. Tuesday. The changing of the guard wasn't for another hour and a half, so the kind of crowd that had gathered was the patient kind. The kind that buys fudge from the shop across the road and reads the brass plaques on the walls with genuine interest. Not the jostling, elbow-throwing crowd of a peak summer Saturday. This was gentler. Quieter. I'd found a spot near the Henry VIII gate, far enough from the main tourist cluster to breathe, close enough to see anything worth seeing, and I was doing what you do when you're alone in a place that's too beautiful to leave but too public to properly feel. I was watching people. Taking mental notes. Pretending I was the kind of person who journals. That's when I first noticed her. Not because of who she was. Because of the way she moved. She came around the corner of the Long Walk End, not from a car, which I thought was strange later, though I didn't think it was strange then, with 2 adults moving just slightly too close to her sides. Not holding her hands. Not quite. But close. The way people walk beside someone they are responsible for rather than simply with. She was small. Young. 8, maybe 9 at the outside. Brown hair caught back in a low ponytail that had been neat once and was making its escape now, a few strands loose around her face. She was wearing a coat, navy, good wool, the kind with actual buttons rather than a zip, and dark trousers and shoes that were sensible but not the chain store kind. I noticed the shoes because I was looking down. I'd spilled tea on my own. When I looked up, she was maybe 30 feet away from me, moving along the outer edge of the public path that runs parallel to the castle wall. The 2 adults, a woman in her late 30s with that particular kind of composed face that reads as professionally calm, and a man maybe 10 years older in a dark jacket, were keeping pace. She had a program in her hands. One of those Windsor Castle visitor ones with the aerial photograph on the cover. She was holding it with both hands, looking at it, her lips moving slightly like she was reading something out to herself. It was the most ordinary thing in the world. And then, she stopped. Not a gradual slowing. A stop. Full stop. Like someone had found her pause button. The woman beside her, I'd learn her name later, not her official title, just her name, reached out and touched her elbow. A small gesture. Questioning. The girl didn't move. Her head was still bent toward the program, but she wasn't reading it anymore. I could see that from where I was standing. Her eyes weren't tracking. They were fixed. Somewhere behind the paper, behind the image, behind the moment. The man said something. Low. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the registered, careful, low, the voice you use when you're trying not to startle something. She didn't respond to that either. And here's the thing that made the back of my neck go cold before my brain had caught up with why she started to fold. Not fall. Not collapse. Fold. Knees going first, then, the torso curling inward, like someone slowly deflating. The program crumpling in her grip. The woman caught her under the arms immediately, fast, practiced, the movement of someone who was drilled for this, but the girl's legs weren't working right, and they both went sideways a step before the man was there too, and now they were a knot of people, the girl in the middle, and the composure on both adults' faces had cracked completely open. 30 feet away from me.
In public. No car. No screen. No gate between her and the world. I stood there holding my dead cup of tea and thought, that child is not okay. The tourists around me hadn't catoned on yet. The American couple was still adjusting angles. The school group had their backs to it. The Japanese tour guide's yellow umbrella bobbed serenely. But I'd seen it. And, across the path closer than me, maybe 15 feet, one of the footguards had seen it too. He was posted at one of the subsidiary positions along the wall, not at the main gate. Ceremonial post. Bearskin, scarlet tunic, the works. Motionless, as they have to be, staring at nothing in the middle distance the way they're trained to, the human equivalent of a lighthouse. Decorative. Immovable. Or so everyone assumes. His eyes had moved. Just that. Just the eyes. But I was looking directly at him and I saw it, the almost imperceptible shift, the flicker, the moment when the nothing he was trained to stare at became something he was actually seeing. He'd clocked her. Whatever she was. Whoever she was. He'd clocked that something was wrong. And now I watched this man, this statue of a man in 40 pounds of ceremonial uniform with a rifle at his shoulder, run a calculation behind his eyes that no one in the tourist photographs would ever notice. His jaw moved. Just barely. He was speaking. Not to me. Not to anyone visible. Into the collar of his tunic. I learned later, from the kind of second-hand, whispered at a dinner party source that you either believe or you don't, that what he said was approximately 4 words. 4 words into the radio embedded in the high collar of his uniform, which the public doesn't know about and which looks, in photographs, like nothing at all. 4 words that went up a chain that exists specifically because this kind of thing, a member of the royal family, in public, without full protocol, showing signs of a medical episode, is precisely the scenario the chain was built for. 4 words. The response time was under 90 seconds. I'm getting ahead of myself. I do that. My sister says I bury the lead and she's not wrong. Let me go back to the girl on the path. Because the 90 seconds before the response came were the longest 90 seconds I have ever personally witnessed. And I've witnessed some long ones. I was there when my dad's car broke down on the M6 on Christmas Eve. I was in a waiting room in 2019 that I still don't talk about. I know what long seconds feel like. These were longer. The woman, composed face now not even attempting composure, had gotten the girl down. Sitting. Back against the castle wall, on the actual stone of the base, which no tourist is supposed to sit on and which in that moment no one in her orbit cared remotely about. The program was on the ground, bent at an ugly angle. The girl's head was forward. Chin toward her chest. She was breathing, I could see the movement of her shoulders, but the rhythm of it was wrong. Too fast. Then, too slow. Like an engine that can't find its idle. The man had his phone to his ear and, his body turned outward, facing the crowd, not her, a physical barrier. Not obviously. He wasn't blocking anyone. He was just there. Between her and the world, in a way that looked incidental and wasn't. The woman was talking. Low and continuous. The way you talk to someone who needs to hear a voice more than they need to hear words. The girl's hand came up. Gripped the woman's sleeve. Just gripped it. Tight. And held. I should tell you something that I only said aloud once, to my sister, the night after it happened, over the phone, and then never said again because it felt too much like an intrusion on something private. I recognized her. Not from the papers, not from the magazines at the dentist's, not from the occasional headline on someone else's phone on the tube. Somewhere older than that. Somewhere in the chest. The way you recognize a particular quality of light at dusk even if you've never stood in that exact spot. Recognition that predates information. I knew who she was the moment her knees started to fold. And, knowing made the next 80 seconds feel like standing outside a house fire with no hose. The guard hadn't moved. His body hadn't moved.
Every millimeter of his physical presence was still exactly where protocol required it to be. But his jaw was working again. And his eyes, tracking now on the most minimal arc possible, the smallest responsible movement, were doing the job his hands and feet weren't permitted to do. He was watching the exits. He was watching the crowd. He was watching the man with the phone. He was watching the girl against the wall. He was, in the middle of standing perfectly still in 40 pounds of ceremonial uniform, running the most active surveillance of his post he'd probably run in years. And something in the line of his shoulders, something I can't fully explain, something that lives below the level of conscious reading, told me he was ready. Ready in the specific way that has nothing to do with physical size or weaponry or the rifle at his shoulder. Ready in the way of someone who has decided. Whatever comes next, whatever comes around that corner, whatever breaks from the crowd, whatever noise or movement or camera-wielding idiot decides this is their moment, they will be the thing that stands between it and her. That's what I saw in his shoulders. That decision. 90 seconds. Tick. The first of them came from the direction of the Henry VIII gate. Not running. They don't run in public. Running creates panic and panic creates crowd movement and crowd movement creates the second emergency that complicates the first. They moved fast, but fast the way water moves fast, with the path of least resistance already mapped, every step certain. Two of them. Plainclothes. The kind of plainclothes that, once you've seen it, you can never unsee the particular quality of alertness in the posture, a jacket cut just slightly wrong at the shoulder for reasons that have nothing to do with the tailor. They reached her in the time it took the American couple to take one more photo. What happened next happened below the level of public perception, which is the most impressive thing I can tell you about the people who do this job. A phone call here. A repositioning there. A gentle, firm, completely unremarkable suggestion to the small cluster of tourists who'd started to notice that something might be happening, nothing to see, roadworks, a vehicle coming through, if you just, and the cluster dispersed, still not entirely sure what they'd been moved from or why. The school group's lanyard-wearing teacher had her attention redirected by a very polite man who appeared to have genuine expertise in Tudor military architecture. The yellow umbrella bobbed away. The American couple got their photo. And, in the 15-foot radius that had been quietly, professionally cleared, in the time it takes to drink a cup of tea that's already cold, the girl against the wall was being seen to. I stayed where I was. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't entirely because I thought I'd be useful. It wasn't entirely because I was worried. It was also because I couldn't move. My feet had made a decision my brain hadn't signed off on. I stood there and watched a small girl with a runaway ponytail try to remember how to breathe. And watched the people around her, the woman with her sleeve in a white-knuckle grip, the man who had put his phone away now, the two plainclothes who'd materialized from nothing, do what they could. She was talking. Low. Broken up. I couldn't hear the words. Wouldn't have let myself hear them even if I could. But, at some point, and I couldn't tell you exactly when, time was doing strange things, her breathing changed. The too fast too slow engine found something closer to a rhythm. Her shoulders dropped. Half an inch. Maybe less. But, down. And, the woman with the composed face put both hands on the girl's face, framing it, tilting it up slightly, and said something short, and the girl nodded. Once. Small. But, a nod. The guard hadn't moved. He wouldn't move until he was stood down and his relief arrived. He would stand there in his bearskin and his scarlet until the protocol said otherwise, and he would watch the middle distance the way he was trained to, and no tourist photo would catch the moment his jaw had moved, or the decision his shoulders had made, or the 4 words that had gone up the chain. But I saw it. And I stood there with my cold cup of tea, at Windsor Castle, on a Tuesday, and felt something I can only describe as the opposite of alone, not because I was included, I wasn't, I was invisible and irrelevant to everything that had just happened, but because I had just watched a group of human beings, in the specific quiet of a practice so deeply drilled it looks like instinct, hold a circle around someone small who needed holding. That's part 1. The quiet before the crack, and the first few seconds of what comes after. Part 2 is when things got complicated. End of part 1. The thing about a panic attack, and I say this as someone who has had 3 in their life, one in a Sainsbury's, one on a night bus, one that I will take with me to my grave without ever telling anyone where I was, is that from the outside it looks like something is catastrophically wrong. And, from the inside it feels like you are dying and, also like you will never die and, somehow, impossibly, both of those things at once. I know the face she was making against the wall. I recognized it. Not with my eyes. With something behind my sternum that used to know that face very personally. The wide, fixed quality of the eyes, not frightened so much as stuck. Like the mind has fled to the upper room of itself and locked the door and is watching from the window while the body does whatever bodies do when the signal gets crossed. The hands, one still wrapped in the woman's sleeve, the other flat on the cold stone ground beside her, pressing. Pressing down like the ground is the only argument she has left against floating away. The breath. God, the breath. I could see it from where I stood. The way it came in too high, too fast, catching somewhere up near the collarbones instead of settling in the belly where breath is supposed to live. She was 8 years old, 9, maybe, and she was having a panic attack against the outer wall of Windsor Castle on a Tuesday morning, and the world was walking past with its yellow umbrellas and its structural smiles, and she was pressing her palm to the stone like she was trying to borrow its certainty. The woman, I'll call her M, because she had the kind of quality to her that makes you want a single syllable, something clean and trustworthy. M had her own hand over the girl's now. Over the one pressing on the stone. She wasn't pulling her up. She wasn't trying to move her. She was just adding weight. Warmth. Another hand on the stone to say, yes, this is real, you're here, this is ground. I'd read about that once. Grounding techniques. The idea that touch-specific, weighted, intentional touch on a surface can thread someone back into their body when their body has lost the signal. I'd read it in an article. I'd tried it in a Sainsbury's, on the cold metal of a freezer door. It works. Slowly. The man, I'll call him D, same logic, D had moved position. He was no longer between her and the crowd. He was crouched slightly to her left, one knee on the path, his body angled outward but his face turned in. He was talking now. Not over M, underneath her. 2 voices, 2 registers, layered. M's voice the steady rhythm of it, D's voice the lower note. A chord, almost. The 2 of them making a sound around her. I'm going to sound strange saying this. But it looked like singing. Not literally. But the quality of it. The deliberate, sustained nature of 2 voices holding a frequency around someone who needs it. That's what it looked like from 30 feet away on a Tuesday in Windsor. She was coming back. You can see it, the return, if you know what you're watching. The eyes refocus first. Not all at once. Incremental, like a camera adjusting. One blink, then another, and, between them something shifts in the quality of the gaze. The stuck thing loosens. Just slightly. Then, the breath. The breath is the last to sort itself. Or the second to last. Because after the breath comes the awareness, the recalibrating awareness of where you are and what just happened and who is watching, and that awareness has its own kind of wreckage. I watched her eyes refocus. I watched the blink. I watched the awareness arrive. And I watched her face do something I was not prepared for. It didn't crumple. That's what I expected, the relief cry, the emotional exhale that I've done myself coming out of it, sitting on the floor of a Sainsbury's with my back against a freezer. The letting go. She went still. Stiller than before. A different stillness now, not the stuck stillness of the episode, but a controlled, deliberate quiet. The stillness of someone taking precise inventory. Her eyes went to M's face. Then, to D's. Then, just for a second, the most precise second, to the crowd beyond them. To the ordinary world that had kept moving while she'd been gone. Something moved in her jaw. Something that had nothing to do with panic. I know what that is too. I know the version of that, the checking, the assessing, the did anyone see, the what did that look like from out there. I know the humiliation calculus. The adding up of witnesses. She was 8.
She was 9 at the outside. And she was already doing the humiliation calculus. That's the part that stuck in my throat. M said something to her. Short. D said something else. The girl looked at both of them. A long moment. And then, and this is the part one keep coming back to, the part that lodged somewhere and hasn't dislodged yet, she nodded. Not the small fragile nod from before. This was different. This was a decision. Her chin went down and came back up, and there was something in the line of it that was not 8 years old at all. Something that had seen worse and kept the posture. She started to get up. M helped. D was immediately there on the other side. But she was doing it, she was the active thing, they were the assistants, not the other way around. Her legs found themselves beneath her. Her spine straightened. She stood. She reached down and picked up the program that had fallen. Smoothed it once with her palm. Tucked it under her arm. I'm going to tell you something that I know sounds like the kind of thing people say in retrospect to make a story feel more than it was. But I watched it happen, so I'm going to say it. When she stood up and straightened and smoothed that program and tucked it under her arm, the two plainclothes men who had been doing their invisible, professional nothing in the cleared radius around her adjusted their positions. Not toward her. Outward. 1 degree each. Their backs to her. Their faces to the world. A wall reforming. She was standing. The wall could reform. That's not sentiment. That's training. That's protocol, doing what protocol is built for. But it looked like something else. It looked like a room of people quietly agreeing, without a word, that she was back and they were glad and they would not make a production of it. I should tell you about the guard. Because this is his story too. Maybe more than anyone's. He hadn't moved. Of course he hadn't. He was still at his post, still motionless in all the ways that matter to the photographs, still staring at his assigned piece of nothing in the middle distance. But something had changed in his stillness. Earlier, in the 90 seconds before the plainclothes arrived, his stillness had the quality of a compressed spring. Potential. Ready. The decision in the shoulders that I told you about. Now it was different. Now it was the stillness of someone standing down. Not relief, exactly. Not relaxation. Something quieter than both of those. The stillness of having done the thing that was yours to do and returned to your post. Like a heartbeat going back to resting after a sprint. Functional. Resolved. He'd made the call. The call had worked. He was back to being a statue. I watched him for a while after that. Watched the tourists resume photographing him. Watched a child smaller than the girl against the wall, for maybe 5, toddle toward him with the specific fearless curiosity of someone who hasn't yet learned that some things are not for touching. Watched the child's parent retrieve them with apologies, the guard giving nothing, revealing nothing, the professional void intact. He was a statue again. But I'd seen his jaw move. I'd seen the 4 words. I knew what kind of statue he actually was. The girl was moving now. Not toward the main entrance. Not the public route. The small group M.D., the 2 plainclothes, had arranged themselves around her in what looked, to anyone not paying attention, like a perfectly ordinary cluster of people deciding which direction to go. A family, maybe. A private tour group. Nothing to see. They moved toward a gate that I hadn't noticed before, set into the wall, smaller than the main entrance, the kind you stop noticing after the first few minutes because it's not where the action is. She walked in the middle. Her ponytail had given up entirely now, the band was still in but the hair was mostly loose, falling around her face, the kind of dishevelment that happens after you've been somewhere hard and come back. She was talking. To M, I think. Low. I couldn't hear it. But she was talking. That was the thing, she was talking, generating words, sending them outward, and M was responding, and D was adding something from the other side, and they were a conversation. She wasn't inside anymore. She was here. 3 things happened before they reached the gate. First, she stumbled. A small trip, a cobblestone catches the toe thing, nothing dramatic. M's hand was on her arm before she'd fully registered it. She steadied. Kept moving. Second, she looked back. Just once. Just for a second. The way you look back at a place that had you for a moment and gave you back. I don't know what she was looking at. The wall where she'd sat. The path. The particular air of that particular spot. She looked. Then, forward again. Third, somewhere in the space between the second thing and reaching the gate, she said something that made M stop walking for just a half step. Not a full stop. A half-step hesitation, and then, they were moving again. I will never know what that sentence was. I will think about it, probably, for the rest of my life. They went through the gate. It closed behind them. A very ordinary sound. The specific clunk of old iron in old stone. And, the world outside kept being the world. The school group had circled back. The yellow umbrella was explaining something about the Garter Tower. The American couple had found a new angle, the husband's smile had recovered its genuine quality, which was actually quite a nice smile, and his wife was laughing at something he'd said, and they were happy. Normal. Ordinary. Tuesday. Except. 30 feet away, there was a program lying on the ground near the wall. One of the Windsor Castle visitor ones, with the aerial photograph on the cover. Bent at an ugly angle. Exactly where it had fallen. She'd picked up a new one. This one was still there. I walked over and picked it up. Bent it back into shape as best I could. Put it in my bag. I don't know why. I still have it. I stood by the wall for a while after that. Where she'd been. The stone was cold through my jacket sleeve when I touched it. I thought about being 8 years old in public when your body betrays you. I thought about a guard who'd been told, by every tradition, by every inch of his uniform, by every protocol in the manual, to be a statue. Who'd chosen to be a man first? 4 words. That's all it had taken. 4 words into a collar that looked like nothing, into a chain that exists because someone, somewhere, decided that the gap between protocol and emergency needed to be exactly 4 words wide. He was back to being a statue. But, he'd been a man first. And, she was through the gate. I bought another tea from the stall near the Long Walk end. Hot this time. Actually hot. I went and sat on a bench and drank it while the crowd moved around me, ordinary and continuous, and I thought about the humiliation calculus, the adding up of witnesses that I'd seen on the face of a child against a castle wall. I thought, she'll carry this. Not the panic attack itself. That's a medical thing, a chemistry thing, the wiring misfiring in the specific dramatic way it does. That passes. That has a name and a framework and a growing stack of peer-reviewed research. She'll carry the moment after. The awareness arriving. The inventory. The did anyone see? That doesn't have a treatment. That just lies there. In the specific texture of certain kinds of days. I know. I know because I still feel it when I pass Sainsbury's. I called my sister that night. She asked how Windsor was. I said it was good. Cold but good. Worth the train. She asked if I did the changing of the guard. I said I didn't make it in time. Which was technically true. She said that was a shame. And I said yeah, and I meant something different by it than she understood, and we talked for another 40 minutes about her thing with the holiday dates and Mom's thing with the kitchen and her colleague Greg who was honestly just the worst, and it was ordinary and good and normal and I was glad of it. But, somewhere in the bag by my feet was a bent Windsor Castle visitor program. And, I was thinking about 4 words. And, a ponytail making its escape. And, a small hand pressing on cold stone. Borrowing the ground's certainty. End of part 2. There's a version of this story I didn't tell. I've been working up to it, circling it the way you circle a thing you're not sure you have the right to say. But, I'm saying it now. In part 3. Because part 3 is the part where the story stops being about what happened and starts being about what it means. Which is always, I think, where the true weight of a story lives. Here it is, somewhere between the gate closing behind her and me buying that second cup of tea. I sat against that same wall. Different spot. A few feet along. But, the same cold stone. The same particular Windsor light, making up its mind about being gold. I sat against it. I don't know how long. Not long. My jeans were not built for sitting on castle paving. But, I sat there and I pressed my own hand to the ground flat, same as she had, and I thought, yeah. Okay. That does work. I'm telling you that because I think it matters to the story. Not because it's about me. Because it tells you something about what had just happened that couldn't be told any other way. Whatever that girl had been pressing down from, pressing into the stone to get away from, it was real enough that a stranger felt its aftershock in the ground. Let me go back. There's a thing I skimmed over in part 2 that I need to be honest about, because it changes the texture of the story if you know it. When she stood up, when she got her legs under her and straightened and smoothed the program, there was a moment, about 4 seconds long, where she looked directly at me. Not at the space I was occupying. At me. The same inventory she'd done of the crowd, the did anyone see calculation, landed on my face. 4 seconds. Maybe 3. Long enough to know it was a look and not just a sweep. I did not look away. I don't know if that was right. I think it was the honest thing, which isn't always the right thing but is at least a consistent thing. Looking away felt like pretending, and pretending felt like adding something to her balance sheet she hadn't asked for. So I looked back. Steady. Nothing in it. Just, I'm here and I'm not a threat and I saw and I will not make a thing of it. She held it for those 4 seconds. Then, Dee said something and her attention went there instead. But, before it did, and I have turned this over enough times now to be sure I'm not inventing it, something in her face loosened. Fractionally. The humiliation calculus resolving some small piece of itself. Or maybe I'm making that up because I need there to be a moment where I did something useful. I genuinely cannot tell. I know more now than I knew that Tuesday. Some of it from conversations that happened weeks later. Some from the particular skill of reading between lines in carefully worded statements. Some from the same dinner party I mentioned before, where things get said under the understanding that they will travel no further, and here I am, traveling them, but without names, without specifics, without anything that could place a face to a moment. Which is the only version I'm able to offer and the only version I'm willing to. What I know is this. The panic attacks, because there had been more than one, I learned, more than this Tuesday, a pattern that the adults around her were learning to navigate, were not, or not only, the clinical kind. Not the free-floating anxiety disorder kind. They had triggers. Specific, identifiable triggers. Crowds were sometimes one. Being outside a certain perimeter without the full apparatus of protection was sometimes one. The combination of both, on an unscheduled, lower protocol visit that had been intended as a lighter, more ordinary day, the kind that was meant to feel like freedom, was, apparently, a particularly sharp one. The irony of that is worth sitting with. The thing that was meant to feel like ordinary childhood, the castle visit, the visitor program, the public path, was the thing that snapped the wire. Because she's not an ordinary child. And, the gap between what her life is and what ordinary childhood looks like, when you're standing inside it on a Tuesday, is apparently measurable in panic. That's not a criticism of anything or anyone. I'm not making a case for anything. I'm just saying, the gap is real. And, it has a texture. And, she feels it. I thought about the guard a lot in the weeks after. The specifics of what he'd done, the mechanics, the protocol I understood well enough from what I'd witnessed. 4 words. A chain. A response time under 90 seconds. What I kept turning over was the decision point. Because here's the thing about a foot guard at his post.
Everything about his position, the uniform, the training, the tradition, the whole elaborate symbolic architecture of the thing, says, you are a representation.
You are not a person, in this moment. You are a function.
Your job is to be the thing that tourists photograph and to not be a person while you do it. The being a statue is not incidental.
It's the entire point.
It's what the job means. And he chose, in a window of time I'd estimate at under 20 seconds, from the moment he clocked that something was wrong to the moment his jaw moved, to be a person first. To make a calculation that sat outside his formal remit and inside his actual human responsibility. People talk about the royal guard like they're furniture. Historic furniture, beautiful furniture, but furniture. I've heard it, the laugh, the trying to make them move thing, the treating them as props in someone else's photograph. This man was 45 seconds ahead of everyone in that courtyard. He'd identified, assessed, and acted before anyone else registered that there was anything to assess. That's not furniture. That's someone paying attention in the most specific way. I went back to Windsor 2 weeks later. My sister was free this time. She'd felt guilty about bailing and done what she does when she feels guilty, which is overcorrect in the direction of enthusiasm, so she'd bought us afternoon tea at a place in the town that she'd read about, and we'd done the castle properly, with the tour, and she'd been delighted by the state apartments in a way that was entirely genuine and also slightly embarrassing because she kept doing this thing with her hands whenever she saw a chandelier. We walked the same path. I don't know what I expected. A mark on the stone? A change in the air? Nothing. Just the path. The wall. The particular light. A different guard at the subsidiary post. Different bearskin, different face, same stillness. My sister said something about the architecture. I said yes, agreed, impressive. She said, don't you think this is all a bit much? All this for one family? I thought about a small hand pressing on cold stone. I thought about a jaw that had moved. I said, probably. But, then, it's not really about the family, is it? It's about what the people around them do when something goes wrong. She thought I meant it generally. Politically. She launched into a whole thing about public funding and modern relevance, and I let her, because she's not wrong about any of it, and also because the thing I actually meant was too specific to explain without telling a story I wasn't going to tell. I looked at the wall where she'd sat. I thought, she's doing better. I don't know this. But I thought it anyway. The program is still in a drawer in my flat. I've looked at it a few times. The aerial photo of Windsor on the cover, the round tower, the long walk stretching away like a sentence, the whole compressed geography of it from above. All the rooms you can't see because they're inside. All the life that happens in them, sealed behind the stone that tourists press their palms to. I've thought about unfolding it. Reading what she was reading when she stopped. I haven't. It's not mine to read. There are things I keep coming back to. I'll tell you two of them. The first is this, what she did, picking up a new program, tucking it under her arm, straightening her spine, walking forward, is not something you're taught. Or rather, it's something you might be taught, in the specific relentless schooling of a life like that one, but being taught it and doing it, in the moment, in the afterwash of having your body go wrong in public, are two entirely different things. She did it. 8 years old. 9 at the outside. Coming back from something real, in public, with witnesses, and choosing, I think, though I can't prove it, to let her spine do what it knew how to do. That's not resilience as a concept. That's resilience as a Tuesday morning. And, it's harder than it looks. Considerably harder than it looks. I know because I've tried it from a Sainsbury's floor and it took me 3 attempts to get my legs right and I was 26 and no one was watching. The second thing I keep coming back to is smaller. It's the walk. The walk from where she'd been sitting to the gate. 40 feet, maybe less. M and D and the 2 plainclothes around her, the conversation happening, the circuit of her coming back online. Somewhere in those 40 feet, the ponytail gave up entirely. The band was still there, but the hair was fully loose, falling around her face in the way it does when you've been somewhere hard and Your body's been doing things to it without your input.
She didn't fix it. She had time. She had hands. She didn't fix it. I've thought about that a lot. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe she didn't notice, or she did notice and she was too tired for it. But I keep thinking, maybe she just decided not to.
Maybe, in the specific aftermath of having held yourself together in public, of having done the inventory, made the calculation, straightened the spine, picked up the program, made the choice to walk forward, maybe the ponytail just wasn't something she had left over.
And that's okay. Some things you hold. Some things you let go. The wisdom is in knowing which is which. She let the ponytail go. She held everything else. I've never told anyone the full version of this.
I told my sister the edited version. The Windsor trip was good, cold but good, worth the train. I told the dinner party story in the clipped, whisper-appropriate version that lets people fill in the gaps with what they already suspect.
I've said nothing online. Nothing to anyone who would write it down. I'm saying it here.
I'm saying it because there's a version of this story that's already out there, the headline version, the what happened version, the Royal Guard rushes to act with desperate SOS version, and it's not wrong, exactly, but it's the aerial photograph. All the rooms inside are still sealed.
This is a few of the rooms. Not the private ones, I don't have access to those and wouldn't use them if I did. But the rooms that exist in the space between public and private, where a stranger stands 30 feet away with a dead cup of tea and sees something real and doesn't look away and picks up a bent program off the ground afterward and keeps it. The rooms that aren't in the official record but are, I think, part of what actually happened. There's a last thing. Weeks later. Different city. Different context entirely. I was at a thing for work, a launch event at a venue in central London. One of those milling around with a glass of something events where the talking is really just the pause between other talking. A woman next to me was going on about the royal family. The usual. A mix of affection and performed cynicism that you get from people who secretly care quite a lot. She said something about Charlotte not naming the incident I'd seen. She didn't know about the incident. She was talking about something she'd seen on the news, some public appearance, some walkabout. She said, that girl is going to be interesting when she grows up. And then, she took a sip of her drink and turned to someone else. I stood there. Thought about a spine straightening. A program under an arm. A ponytail let go. The guard's jaw. 4 words. Thought about a child pressing her palm into the cold stone of a castle wall to borrow the certainty of the ground. And then, standing up. Yeah, I thought. She's going to be interesting. She already is.